And happy you could join. I saw your message about not joining with camera. That's fine. Good to have you here anyway. All right. Any anything anyone would like to share from what we've covered so far? From any questions that have come up from reflecting on what we've covered, from reviewing our notes, if you've done that, from watching anything that you needed to catch up with? Any questions or reflections? Okay. I've started last week. I started also a group, teacher training group in Portuguese, and I've realized that YouTube is actually very good at translating video content. It does a pretty good job of, if you put for it to do captions and translate, auto-generate captions and translate, it's very accurate. And so for those of you who don't speak good Portuguese, you could still I'm gonna make the videos available from the two groups for all of the teacher trainees. And that way you can have the content as resource of the other group as well.
Peter, here Antonio is saying he wants to join in, and you need to accept him, I think.
Maybe he's trying to join on the wrong link. I'm gonna just make sure he's got the right link. Thanks for letting me know. And yeah, I think he must have been using a different link. I think when it says waiting for host, it's because you're on a Zoom room that hasn't been opened. So yeah, I was saying that we've got resources from two different groups, and now I'm aware that some of you may not want to watch the videos in Portuguese, and some of you might be, when you catch up, you might be just listening to the audio of the recordings, and so it may not be convenient. And so I'm not going to, let's say, split content completely between the two groups, expecting you to have to watch the other group's videos in order to be able to, let's say, have the complete content. But the reason I'm mentioning this, that you'll basically have this extra resource of the Portuguese group's recordings, is because to some extent, the way that I teach or facilitate or share is a very fluid process of responding to the things that come up in the group. And so things will come up differently at different times in different ways for each group. And so even if I'm intending to give you and the other group the same content, the way that the content reveals itself will be different. The things that get emphasized will depend on the questions that come up, the things that get explored more deeply, And so, for example, with the other group, I shared about some of my teachers, which is something that Paula had asked me to do also. So I will do an introduction also of my teachers, some of them today, and I'll try to speak perhaps about some slightly different things than I spoke about in the other class. And you can also watch the other class So you get some additional information. Welcome, Antonio.
Hello, Peter. Hello, everyone. Thank you, and apologies for the delay.
That's okay. It's okay. So that's one of, I think the main thing I wanted to start with was to refer to this this content that's also being recorded with the other group. I'll be sharing the playlist, and I'll be sharing these videos also in a playlist form so you can access them all. And we will, for those who can attend live at the time of the retreats, we'll also be meeting each other. The different groups will come together at the time of the retreats. Okay. Any questions? Any questions, reflections, needs?
Yes, I'm curious about the retreat in July, what it will be like.
Yeah.
If you could share that at one point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll share an outline. I'm still it's still becoming clear to me. So it's not completely completely set out yet, but one thing that will include will be some exploration of the physical practices of what are known as the 5 Tibetan rites, which the way that I share them draws also from the Kriya tradition, and you could say reveals some of the subtle aspects of the practice that can be can empower the practice. And also I learned a set of practices from an Egyptian teacher that, again, with understanding of Kriya practices, can bring a potency into the practice. So I'll be sharing those physical techniques, and we'll be doing some pranayama, we'll be doing some voice work, and introducing you also to the, for those of you who have not really done voice work or voice play before, it's a very beautiful way to work with groups in to facilitate meditation when you're in person. It's not impossible to do online, but it's definitely much more enjoyable to do in person. We'll spend some time outdoors as well. We'll be going into the serre and doing some meditation in nature.
Nice. Do we have to learn what you teach us? Will there be a test or something?
Some of the things I will give you an opportunity to share with others, in the group format, so that you can practice facilitating some of the things that I'm sharing, and that also gives you the opportunity of consolidating your experience with it. And when we are sharing, when we're teaching, we also need to we realize what it is that we hadn't fully assimilated yet, and that we need clarified before we feel the ability to teach. And so it's not so much a test in the formal sense or the usual sense, but it's an opportunity to be tested in the sense of seeing where you're at. How confident are you with it? How clear are you with it?
Yeah, okay.
And also, I will be creating some workbook type questions for you to help you review some of the things that we've covered.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking, Paula. So I don't know if you've all seen the document that Paula created with the list of books, and I'll be editing a bit more, perhaps, to just distinguish between the books that are being mentioned and are being read from, and the books that I'm specifically suggesting that you really read the whole book, because I'm not suggesting that all the books that I refer to or the books that I read from would be, let's say, priority for you to go out and buy and read the whole thing. And in fact, some of the books that I will read from, I will be choosing to read from and give commentary on, because they're a little bit more dense or difficult. And so if you feel, I don't want to discourage you from going out and buying them and reading them, but I will choose some that are particularly, I would say, quite difficult reading, you know, and use the classes as an opportunity for extracting useful information and digesting the contents together. For example, the books by Sir John Woodruff, also known as Arthur Avalon, his books are very good, but they're quite difficult also to read. They're written in an older style of English. They're some of the first books on Tantra that were actually translated into English at the beginning of the 20th century. And there is, at the end of this book, there is a translation of a text called the Satchakra Nirupana. And we may do a study of that as well during this journey together, but it will be more relevant in the training cycle that is the Kundalini Clarity. Welcome, Ruth. The Kundalini Clarity cycle. Some of the components that are part of the other trainings, the Kundalini Clarity and the breath work and energy work and sexual alchemy training cycles, some of those themes will also be going into in this cycle that is more focused on Tantra foundations, but not to the same extent, not to the same degree of detail. So as a kind of fractal way, we're looking at the big picture, we're looking at everything, but we're extracting more detail in different parts of the training. And the emphasis, as I've said already, you know, the emphasis in the Tantra foundations is the simplicity. It's having clarity that we can build from, and that if we're helping other people, you know, if you're taking from this to facilitate courses, one-to-one consultations, workshops, retreats, whatever format you'll be working in, to be able to work with people at a level of ease of communication and a level of clarity that everything else can be built upon. You know, if we begin with a lack of clarity about what terms like Kundalini or Karma or Moksha, if let's say, the core terminology and the concepts that we're working with are not really totally clear to us, then it's difficult to build upon that. And, you know, we need that solid ground. Welcome, Atma. Okay, so again, any questions, any sharing, any reflections relating to that? For those of you who've not caught up with the last recording where we went into an exploration of what I refer to as ego dynamics, even if you're trying to go in order to listen to what you've missed, I would suggest catching up with that class. because you don't need to have listened to the previous ones to make sense of that class. And that class will help to make sense of everything else. And it's also an example of what I was saying earlier, that the content is revealed in the flow of the dynamic of the group. Paula commented after the meditation, and as a result of what she said, that content kind of came through at that time. And that's how it flows. So I'm going to share another background picture with some of my teachers and give you some introduction to who they are. Now, mostly what the teachers that are here are from the Kriya Yoga tradition for the most part. So starting with Babaji, I'll be pointing at each one. If you're listening just to the audio later, then it'll be more difficult to figure out what I'm talking about. But here is Babaji, also referred to as Mahavatar Babaji. And there are two main lineages that are known from his teachings of Kriya Yoga. And the main one that is known is associated with, I don't know if you can see the little picture here of Lahiri Mahasaya. I'll actually show you another background image where you can see him a little better. So in this image, he's here, Lahiri Mahasaya, and around the 1870s, Lahiri Mahasaya had an experience while in the Himalayas. He had an encounter with Babaji, who was also pictured here. And as a result of that encounter and the teachings he received, the Kriya, you could say the Kriya Yoga teachings were reintroduced and brought into more public knowledge. There's a lot that I could say to give you a sort of a rich history of this, but I'll come back to aspects of this during the course. For now, perhaps one of the relevant parts of the story is that Lahiri Mahasaya wanted to stay with Babaji. He welcomed him into this cave when he met him and said, here's your blanket, here's your bowl, been waiting for you for a while. And he said, it's time to continue your work from the previous lifetime. And he went to see him every day for a period. And then really he wanted to stay. He wanted to just be there and immersed in sadhana, in spiritual discipline. And Babaji said that his task was actually to return to family life and to be a demonstration, to be an example of the possibility of living, let's say, an enlightened, liberated, self-realized in the world, in family life conditions and conditions of a householder. Because it's still common for many people to think of the deepest spiritual experience to be requiring a kind of monastic life, a life of total renunciation of everything that is worldly. And so Babaji told him his task was to go and really be a demonstration of the possibility of living as a fully self-realized being with the challenges of everyday life as a householder. And although in that story, the way that you'll hear it told, if you read, for example, Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahamsa Yogananda, you may not see much reference there, if any, to Tantra. But the spirit of this message, of living as a liberated being and as a householder, this was really that's completely aligned with what Tantra has meant historically, that you draw from the richness of all the yogic practices, the yogic teachings, the yogic philosophy on liberation, but in a way that is so unconditional that you don't turn your back on the world in order to experience the divine. Instead, you allow your senses, your mind, your vision, your seeing to be cleansed so that you see the divine in all that you're experiencing. Not only when you close your eyes and you bring yourself to stillness and find the peace in the stillness, but in the activity, in the movement, in the messiness of life, you experience the divine play. I mentioned that there are two main sources of Kriya Yoga teachings that are known. And so one comes from Babaji to Lahiri Mahasaya, and then to many disciples and the lineages of disciples that have spread from there. The more well-known of those being Paramahamsa Yogananda, who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi. Pictured here next to, beneath Babaji, is Yogi Ramaiah. And he had an experience of being, I think, paralyzed for some period. And this was before he became a yogi. He was experiencing a prolonged sickness with a certain degree of paralysis, if I remember correctly. And at some point, he started to experience a contact with Babaji. And it actually coincided with, I think, the actual week in which Paramahamsa Yogananda died. I think was when Yogi Ramaiah began to receive communication from Babaji and guidance from Babaji. And ultimately, he became a promoter of yoga therapy through what he experienced in terms of his recovery process. But he also became connected through Babaji with the Siddha tradition of Tamil Nadu, which goes back to figures such as Agastya and Boganathar. So I'm going to go back to the other picture to explain some of these other historical figures. And I said that this was going to be about my teachers also. So to give you that context, over here again, you see he was in the other picture. This is Shibendu Lahiri. He is the great grandson of Lahiri Mahasaya, and he's one of my teachers. And here is Paramahamsa Pradnanananda, who was the first of my Kriya Yoga teachers. And I read from a book that he wrote, a translation of the Tantra, Shankalini Tantra, Jnana Shankalini Tantra. And in the picture, there's also Paramahamsa Hariharananda, who was his teacher, and the two of them were present in my initiation. I received the teachings from Hariharananda and the initiation from Pradnanananda. The figure on this side here, this is Yogiraj Gurunath Siddhanath. And he also was a disciple, let's say, he received initiation from Hariharananda. And he also had his own contact with Babaji and let's say initiation directly from Babaji. And he was also connected with the Nath Yogi tradition. And I'm trying to, modulate how much information I give here on each person to get through this today. So here is Marshal Govindan, known also as Satchidananda, and it was it's through his work that the books like this have been published. I started reading a bit from here the other day, the Yoga of the 18 Siddhas. So he got together a lot of Tamil scholars who are experts in the 18th Siddha tradition and who are able to do the translations from the more ancient Tamil texts. And so he's been doing the work of preserving the texts of the Siddhas. And for those who are not familiar, which, depending on which of the classes you've caught up with, you may not be fully familiar with the term Siddha, but it really refers to the realized ones, those who've attained enlightenment. And in many cases, it refers to those who have attained it to a level of embodiment, of transformation, that they are manifesting miraculous powers in their day-to-day life. So often that's also what's implied by the word Siddha. Above here, this picture is taken, if I'm not mistaken, in Palani, at the temple which is associated with Boganathar, who's pictured up here. And Boganathar, when Babaji was giving his teachings and guidance to Yogi Ramaiah, and so going back to the picture, so you're getting familiar, hopefully, with who I'm speaking of. This is Yogi Ramaiah. When he was giving the teachings to Yogi Ramaiah, he, in some sense, put him in touch with the Siddha tradition, as I mentioned before, and with Boganathar as a guide, also, let's say. And something I can mention also, I received, when traveling through Tamil Nadu with Satchidananda here, some initiations into the, let's say, these Siddha lineages by receiving the mantras that would enable me to draw connection with create connection with the Siddhas, to let's say, receive blessings from them. And so one of my practices is to use the mantra of Siddha Boganathar as a source of grace and support and guidance, and also the mantra for Mahavatar Babaji. So in some sense, although I wouldn't say I've had, let's say, physical contact with Babaji and Boganathar, they're still very present in my work, as let's say, a source of guidance through the current of their energy. So coming to some of the others who are pictured here. Over here is Ramalinga Swami, also known as Swami Ramalinga. He lived also in the 19th century, and he's said to have ascended, to have transformed his body into light, having dedicated decades to not just an enlightenment process, as when we think of it as a process of bringing your mind into, let's say, alignment with reality, your consciousness, but also the body being transformed into the vibration of, let's say, divine light. And I've also received guidance and teachings from a yogi who says he was Ramalinga Swami at that time and incarnated in this time to bring a different kind of orientation to help spiritually awakened people to experience, let's say, well, to put it in plain terms, to experience prosperity in this life, because he said his mission, having realized that the tendency generation after generation is that spiritual people awaken and then retreat from the world. They disconnect from the culture. And in that way, the, you could say, mainstream culture becomes, the tendency is for it to become more and more materialistic, because those who awaken disconnect from it. And so there is an evolution taking place along the lines of individual human experience, their individual soul, but human culture is maintaining a certain density. So he says he took on the mission of bringing techniques to people, practices that would help them spiritually awaken people to have, let's say, the power of prosperity in order to be able to bring spiritual influence into the material culture, so that human culture itself will be empowered to evolve along with the individual's awakening. Here is Leonard Orr, who was, you could say, a disciple of Babaji, but the story there is a little more complicated, because there was a yogi who appeared in, I think in the late 1970s, if I'm not mistaken, and who became identified as Babaji. But some people refer to him not as the same Babaji as this one here, as Mahavatar Babaji, but as, in some sense, an emanation of his energy, or as a disciple of his who was embodying his energy, but still not the same being exactly. But he is known as Babaji also. And so Leonard Orr was the person who created the rebirthing breathwork practices, the rebirthing breathwork movement. And Haida Khan Babaji, who was his teacher, spoke of rebirthing as, in some sense, the pranayama of the West. And here is Mantak Chia. So from the Taoist tradition, although Mantak Chia, one of his teachers, was also a Kundalini yogi. So his background was partly from the Taoist tradition, but he also had teachers from the more sort of esoteric practices of Buddhism, and also from the, let's say, tantric practices of Kundalini yoga. So Mantak Chia's background is also mixed in terms of what his knowledge background, his experience, and the texts that have been preserved of Babaji's writings, Voganatha's writings. Also, Voganatha was you could say, a historian of the Siddhas. And one of the things that he writes about is how in his own life, he was called to China to carry on the work of a Siddha who was living there. And ultimately, he transmigrated his consciousness to the body of a Chinese man and became known in China as Bo Yang, which was one of the titles of Lao Tse. So this curious and perhaps for most people, fantastic story. Tells how the siddhas of the Tamil tradition, you could say the tantric Kundalini, the Kundalini Tantra tradition is directly related to the Taoist tradition. Okay, so that's quite a lot of information, perhaps, and certainly a lot of names that some of you will be hearing for the first time. Anything that anyone would like to share, any questions or reflections? I'm seeing here, there's a picture here. There is a picture of Sri Ramana Maharshi together with Ganapati Muni, who was a tantric practitioner who gave Ramana Maharshi his name. He recognized him as a saint and in some sense an avatar, an incarnation of the divine. Here again is Yogi Ramaiah. These are all, in fact, everyone in this picture is from the Tamil, from the region of Tamil Nadu. And it's a region of India very rich in the Siddha tradition. It has its own Siddha tradition known as the Tamil Siddha tradition, but it's a place very rich in you could say in some sense a distinct tradition from the Vedic tradition, which is also why the work of my teacher Satchitananda translating the works of the Siddhas has been significant, because even in India, these texts, these teachings were not known widely, because they were still only in the Tamil language. And for the most part, you could say the common language of spiritual teachings in India has been Sanskrit. Let's say the spiritual scholars have tended to be studying Sanskrit works in India. Of course, in Tibet also, there's the Tibetan texts, but there are far fewer practitioners and scholars who are familiar with the Tamil teachings and the Tamil texts. There are a couple of figures in the Tamil tradition that do have direct connections with the north, and that is Tirumular. I haven't shown a picture of him here, but he is said to have gone from Kashmir down to Tamil Nadu. And so he is an important figure in the Tamil tradition, and that creates a bridge, let's say, with the Kashmiri Shaiva tradition and the Tamil tradition. Agastya also is said to have gone down from the north. In fact, there's an interesting kind of mythological story about Agastya. He was described as a very short, kind of dwarfish figure. But he's one of the few yogis referred to in the really ancient texts. And there's a story about the marriage of Shiva and Parvati in the Himalayan mountains, and that all the celestial beings, all the devas and devis, were invited to attend the union of Shiva and Parvati, and Agastya was also invited, and the concentration of power that was there in the Himalayas as a result of this gathering was just so much that it was creating a potential for the mountains to start sinking. And so they sent Agastya down south to create the balance of the energy in the south and the north. So that's an interesting story, in part because it implies that one enlightened human being was equivalent to all the gods and goddesses, all the devas and devis. And not so, and he was a short human as well. So it's not like he was some sort of colossal figure. He was a little guy, but he was an enlightened, self-realized being. And that is no less than, in fact, is equivalent to all the gathering of all the divine beings. Any reflections, any questions or comments? Okay. Whether you feel an affinity with any of the teachers that I've spoken of or shown you images of here, the important thing is to have some way in which you can powerfully connect with the source, the divine. Even in the non-dual tradition where the formless is emphasized, where we're called back into, you could say, a detachment from all representations in some form of icon, image, and even names and descriptions of the divine. Even in a tradition that emphasizes the formlessness and namelessness of the divine, there's been acknowledgement that we may benefit from, and in some sense maybe even need, some form that we focus on, some human anthropomorphic representation of the divine that we can relate to, that we can experience something like human relationship with, in order to open through love, through devotion, through surrender to the absolute, to the formless. And so I invite you to strengthen whatever relationship you have with the divine, whether it is through visualization, prayer, mantra, contemplation. You know, in the Buddhist tradition, there is the prostrations that are practiced over and over and over to the Buddha as a way of really surrendering all false sense of self to reality. So I invite you to really reflect on what do you have as a practice that connects you directly with the divine? Is there a form that is meaningful for you, a name that is meaningful? And sometimes we've gone through many courses, workshops, retreats, initiations, and there are resources that we've left behind because we've accumulated more and more of them, and we can't do everything. It's become so easy in the West in modern times to get more and more of whether it's teachings and practices, that it can be no longer something that we can really realistically apply everything. So I invite you to tune in to what is powerful for you in your relationship with the divine, what works for you as an everyday practice, perhaps something that is done in combination with meditation, in combination with a yoga practice. And we can also talk about this individually. You know, if there is some way in which you want to consolidate a daily practice, what I've offered you so far with the grace flow meditation is a very down-to-earth way to open, you could say, to life, to the divine. But I also want to acknowledge the power that a form, a representation of the divine can have. It's referred to as Ishta Devata, when you have your own chosen form of the divine, one that is your, let's say, the way that you relate intimately with the divine. I'd like to share a mantra which is, it's from the Tibetan tantric tradition, and it's an invocation at the same time of a particular teacher and of the guru principle, or the principle of the revealer of enlightenment, the bestower of divine blessings and of liberation. So it's both a historical figure, Padmasambhava, known also as Vajraguru, a historical figure, but also an archetypal representation of the, let's say, guru principle. And for some people, that's also what Babaji is, not so much a human, but a manifestation of the guru principle, which is why he seems to transcend space and time, but just become available to people at different times and places. Some see him as an incarnation of Shiva. And similarly, Padmasambhava is acknowledged as, let's say, an incarnation of the Buddha. So this is a mantra you can use to attune to the liberation principle. The name Vajraguru is multi-layered. Vajra can mean thunderbolt, associated with lightning, associated with immediacy, associated with, you could say, immediate enlightenment, instantaneous. And the word Vajra also means diamond. And the diamond is, of course, precious, but also translucent and hard in a way that is, you could say, incorruptible in terms of its strength. And so the Vajra has been used as a symbol for the attainment of enlightenment, of liberation, a transformation of the consciousness and the body itself. Just as I mentioned in the Tamil Siddha tradition, enlightenment that becomes an embodied transformation. In the Tibetan Tantra also, there's this knowledge, wisdom, and tradition passed on of a fully embodied process of enlightenment, of transformation, referred to as attaining the Vajra body, and ultimately what's referred to as the rainbow body, which is when in the physical body becomes energy, becomes light. So I know we're talking of things that go way beyond, let's say, the everyday experience of, how to just bring peace into your day-to-day life, how to bring a sense of connectedness into day-to-day life. We're speaking here also of what could be spoken of as the ultimate unfolding of these processes, of eliminating the distance between our experience of the mundane and our experience of the divine. And as a teacher facilitator, I would say that one of your roles, one of your tasks, it would be always to be evaluating, when working with people, with a group, what are the what kind of blockages, or in what ways are people perpetuating a sense of distance between their current experience, the experience that they've conformed to, and their ultimate aspiration for the divine? What's the gap that they are maintaining? And how can skillful teachings and practices be brought in that help to dissolve the tendency to maintain a gap, let's say a distance from the divine, in the felt sense, right? There's no distance to the divine, but there can be a felt sense of distance. We can feel closed, we can feel separate, even if that is an illusion that we're maintaining, but it can be the subjective experience. So I'll share the mantra, and probably just in the next class, we'll go into an exploration of the meaning, break down the meaning of the mantra into more detail. Om Vajraguru Padmasiddhi 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 just as the Dalai Lama is often referred to as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the teacher who shared with me this mantra is referred to as His Holiness Sakyatrizin, an image of him here. And there's an interesting set of circumstances that led me to that initiation into the Padmasambhava mantra. I'll share that another time. Any questions? Any reflections? If you, I think Paula just shared a link, perhaps of the mantra. I didn't see the details. She shared it in the chat, in the Telegram chat, not here in the Zoom chat. You will find this mantra online. There are recordings of Tibetan monks chanting this, and their pronunciation is a little different to how I've pronounced it. Feel free to find what's potent for you in the pronunciation of the mantra. There are, in India, conventionally it is said, the pronunciation of mantra is very important, because the Sanskrit, and the same is said of the Tamil language, there is you could say, a natural potency to it, an inherent aliveness in the language. Language can become abstract, right? Just something we agree means this or that. It's like a convention that we agree upon. But in some of the ancient languages, they're really considered to be sacred, magical, that the language has a magical invocatory power, where the words are not just something we've agreed mean this or that. They're actually it's the energetic signature of what is being spoken. So when you speak the mantras, you're energetically bringing to life what you're focusing on. And this ends up being confusing when it comes to the Tibetan tradition, because the Tibetan monks, if you think of when they're using mantras that have Sanskrit origins, you could say they're mispronouncing the Sanskrit. They've got their own very particular way of almost swallowing the sounds as they chant. But they've also carried the tradition of practice and very devoted and dedicated practice through the generations. So they've infused a new energy into the mantra through the transmission of the practice. And so I find myself drawing, in some sense, from both sides, from some of the more Sanskrit pronunciation, but also from what I received from Sakyatrizin. That's why you may find that the way I'm pronouncing it's not quite what you'll hear in the recordings. Padmasambhava was considered one of the founders of Tibetan Tantra. He was responsible for the transmission through Nepal into Tibet of the tantric teachings, and was part of the process of the teachings becoming brought into the Tibetan language. And so he exists there at that bridge, the bridge of the cultures, and in some sense the birth of one of the people responsible or considered to be responsible for the birth of Tibetan Tantra. Okay. Anything before we complete? Anything you'd like to share? Okay. Beautiful to be with you. Big hug and wishing you a beautiful weekend.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Same to you.
Thank you.